Hello, welcome. Today we are going to talk about a few phrases in Spanish or words that I think are interesting or cute or whatever that they caught my attention for some reason. I did do one of these videos before, so we will start out with one that I had really never heard prior to coming to Spain, and now I hear it like on the daily at work. I work in a school. Different forms of enterarme are usually me he enterado or no me he enterado or no me entero. If you look up the definition, most of it revolves around finding out. But what I always hear people using it as is, I didn't catch that or I didn't understand that. It's like when you hear what someone is saying, but you don't understand it. So like, I don't know, if someone was saying like, blah, 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 Suecia, and they're like, ¿qué? And they're like, Suecia, and they're like, oh, me he enterado sucia, or I'll like, oh, I understood this different thing, or someone says something to you for like the second time, and you're like, oh, no me he enterado. Like, I don't know, it just sounds like, I know that that's not what the word means, but like, you know, the false friend of it from English would be like, it didn't enter my brain. Like, so yeah, menos mal is an interesting one that like, it means like, oh, thank God, or like, fortunately, which I just think like literally it would be less bad. And it just is funny to me that you're just like, oh, less bad that happened. Like, but often people use it sarcastically. Now I can't think of anything that someone would say. It just reminds me of that audio from Schitt's Creek where what's his name is saying like, I thought I was having a heart attack, but I Googled and it's not a heart attack. And the girl is like, whew. Like, it's such an obvious, like, fake sound. That's what it reminds me of. But anyway, obviously you can use it seriously too, 100%. But I just think it's funny that it's literally, like, less bad. Another little phrase is desde luego. Like, it makes no sense to me, literally, as obviously. I don't know. It's very interesting to me that can be obviously. This one's super random, but I encountered this in a book. Manzana can mean block, like city block. Had no idea. Obviously not the meaning I associate with that word, being apple, but it also can mean a block. I think I found this actually in Hunger Games, where they're talking about like one of the later books, Mockingjay, I think, where they're like talking about the city blocks that are being like blown up by the traps or whatever. Pretty sure that's where I found this word actually. But yeah, city block, manzana. Okay, so twins. In Spanish, there is a separate word for identical twins and fraternal twins, whereas in English, obviously, we just say them as identical or fraternal twins. So gemelos are identical twins, I think, and mellizos are fraternal twins. And so that's like one of those, I don't want to say rare, but I feel like in general, if we were going to pick a language that has more specific words for things, it would be English. But this is an occasion, one of some, but not many, where Spanish has these specific words and English does not. So I'm sure that they are like, what do you mean you have to use the same word for twins? I do think that would probably lead to a lot of, if someone is a twin and you're not sure whether they are identical, or like when twins are little, often you can't tell if they're identical or not. I would imagine that leads to a lot of being like, es un gemelo. Oh, mellizo. No sé. This one's basic. This, comes up pretty early, I think, in most people's journey, but I still think it's interesting. Me suena, like, me suena tu cara is like, you look familiar to me, like your face. Specifically, it can be about like people, like, or a song or a show or something that sounds familiar to you, but me suena. Michi is a word used for cats. I think specifically mostly in Latin America, and I did not know that it was mostly in Latin America until I said it at school, and the kids were like, what? So, but it's wonderful. I don't know why they don't use it here. Like, maybe some people do, but definitely doesn't seem as widespread. But it's like, like we have, it's not quite kitty, like it's more, I think more slang-like than kitty, but I follow so many Michi meme accounts. Yeah, wonderful. Gato, gatito. They just don't have the same, they're not cute sounding. Michi. Cute. Okay, random, but this is more of a use difference than an actual difference. So, platonica means platonic, and like they mean the same thing. They both have two definitions. In English, it has two definitions, and in Spanish, it has two definitions. But in English, there's one that I would consider the default, and in Spanish, the other one is the default. So, I first came across this in a group class where it was a class about like all different types of relationships, and someone was supposed to define platonic. And so they defined it how I would consider it defined in English, which is like a non-romantic, non-sexual love, like a close relationship that is non-romantic, non-sexual typically. And the teacher was like, no, like, and like basically had not heard of this definition. And then as I've been reading things more, I was like, oh, every single time I see this used in Spanish, it is the other definition. So like the platonic ideal of love. So like basically almost not the opposite, often can kind of result in the opposite connotation. So yeah, I think that based on my observations, the default definition in Spanish is the platonic ideal, and the default definition in English is the non-romantic. And you'd have to specify that you meant the other definition in each language. My battery's gonna die, hold on. This one I think is specifically Andalusian, but the word Mari is like used, so it's like a common name or nickname, I think, for people named Maria. I feel like I saw a video about this somewhere, but I haven't been able to find it. But I think it became a common thing that you could refer to any woman as Mari, because so many people were named Maria. I haven't heard people do this all the time or anything, and I kind of was thinking like, well, maybe it's not that common. And then I heard someone today in the teacher's room call the printer Mari. So that I got a little chuckle out of that internally. Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't take that as license to do that moving forward, but it is an interesting quirk that I have noticed locally in Andalusia. So yeah, this is just a quick little sampling of Spanish words and phrases that I have been finding interesting lately. If you have any that you'd like to share, definitely let me know. I will see you in the next video.